Well, Damian Lewis, since we last interviewed you about a year and a half ago, you've had a lot of things happen, but one of the ones we wanted to talk about first was about 11 months ago, you won an Emmy Award for Best Drama Actor on Homeland. Tell us about that night.
Well, it was pretty nerve-wracking. It was, you know, it was a pretty good crowd to be in. I've been walking around saying I think everyone should just get a nice piece of paper and saying, well done, you got nominated, and then everyone should go home. And then I won, and then that idea didn't seem so good anymore. And it was a great night. I didn't know what to expect. I don't think Homeland knew what to expect, and you know, winning in that category was in one of the toughest categories in recent years was just was a thrill. It was a big thrill. It was great.
Well, I've got to say, Rob LaCuria, who's also one of our Australian editors, and I went way out on a limb because everybody in the world was predicting Bryan Cranston last year, and we watched those episodes and we just knew you were going to win. So what were your expectations that night as you're sitting in that seat?
Well, you know, I'd been nominated at the Golden Globes, and I didn't win at the Globes, and you know, I knew that Bryan hadn't won at the Golden Globes before. I can't imagine why not. And he'd won 3 times at the Emmys, and I just thought, you know, it's just fun being at top table, and that's what it feels like. And you know, whoever wins on the night, that's fantastic. That's terrific. Good for them. And then they called out my name, and it came very slowly to me through the fog. And I just sort of looked at my wife, Helen, and I went, Jesus, I think he just said my name. That's what I was thinking. And I remember Claire turning around immediately and, you know, congratulating me, giving me a kiss. And I kissed my wife, and I walked in slow motion to the stage. I turned around, and I saw the whole 3 rows of Homeland crowd in the middle of the auditorium, standing up and whooping and cheering. And it was just a big moment. It was an amazing moment. I did not expect it at all, and yeah, it was something I'll never forget.
Well, you talked, Damian, about it being such a competitive category in recent years, and I'm not sure if you're aware, and I think I have the numbers right, but you're, I think, only the 7th person to win that award in the past 13 years. It's a very exclusive club, one of the most exclusive sort of categories in the Emmys in recent years. Sort of, what's it like to be included on that very exclusive list of people like Tony Soprano and Walter White and Alan Shaw and Jack Bauer and things like that?
Well, you know, it's kind of beyond description, except, you know, I hope that Nick Brody becomes an iconic name in the same way that, or should I say just Brody, you know, becomes an iconic TV character in the same way that Tony Soprano, Jack Bauer, you know, have all become. You know, Don Draper, even though Don Draper hasn't actually walked away with it, he should have. But, you know, that just shows you how competitive the category is. You know, a lot has been made of the golden age of TV drama that we live in. The last 10 years has seen some iconic TV shows, and I think it's probably fair to say that at the head of any iconic TV show is an iconic male or female character. And so, you know, if you get in and you win once, if the writing, if the material remains as compelling as it was in that first season, you got a decent chance, you know, to win again. I think what's extraordinary this year, though, on the other hand, is Breaking Bad never seems to dip in standard, and then we've got other interesting things thrown into the mix, like House of Cards, which is, you know, a historical breakthrough for, you know, Netflix, and And then, just another, incredible actor who I've always loved, Jeff Daniels, in the mix. I just, and those characters might become iconic characters and part of TV history too. But for the time being, look, I've got a second Emmy nomination, and I just want to be there. That's the thing. It's just fun being there, surrounded by your heroes, surrounded by people you've been watching ever since you grew up. Some who are older, some who are contemporaries of yours and you've always admired and respected. Sat in rooms with and gone up for the same jobs with. As you were young actors coming up, and they took some of your jobs, you took some of their jobs, and now look what happened. Everyone's being nominated for awards together because you all stuck at it long enough, and you were rewarded for, there's something. I know I'm sentimental about these things. I'm a bit of a romantic about these things. So I romanticize these evenings. I love the fact that we're all in there together, and I just love being in the room.
Well, for this year's competition, you mentioned some of the nominees there. You've got the episode Q&A in that the judges are looking at right now. Tell us about the. I guess I'm thinking as an actor, you must have just been salivating over that script to get to do that one.
Well, as an actor, when you get an opportunity to work long scenes, it becomes a little bit more like theater, and you have to dig deep to really construct an arc through the scene. You're not going to be able to cut out after a few lines and go and have a cup of coffee and then come back with the cameras all set up in a different place. You're going to run it through, and we ran it through, and each take we did, actually, we shot it in its entirety. We ran it in its entirety, so it actually lasted 18, 19 minutes, and we just ran it all through the day like that. It was like rehearsing an act of a play, just solidly all day long. And yeah, I think it wasn't without its problems. It was that scene is that sort of 15-20 minute sequence of that episode, and the 40 minutes in total of the episode, got a lot of nuanced transitions in it that we actually eked out on the day in the room right at the very last minute. We realized things weren't quite transitioning properly from moment to moment, and we had the glorious and late great Henry Brummel with us, who had written it, who sadly has since died, shockingly and upsettingly for everybody. But he wrote it, and he was there, and it was great to work with Henry on it through the few days that it took us to shoot it. And of course, I knew I'd be sitting in a room with Claire, which is always exciting. And I got a first real opportunity to sit in a room opposite Rupert Friend, and see what he was bringing to the table, up close. And yeah, it was great fun. It was great fun.
And I guess another big thing at the Emmys for you guys last year was you were able to take down Mad Men, which was on a four Emmy-winning streak, on a destiny with history. And again, another very category which only a handful of dramas have won Best Series, due to a few series winning multiple times. What was it like after having won that Emmy for Best Actor to have heard your show named the Best Drama Series of the Year?
I think that was we felt quite a lot of love running up to the Emmys, and we thought, this is great. I think people like us. It's good. We've worked hard and we've been nominated, and we feel, we'll build on this next year, and maybe we'll clinch it next year. But right now, it's just great to be in the room with all these guys. And then they called our name out, and I am such a Mad Men fan that, and I think it's been totally deserving of its wins. And it was incredible. It was incredible, and it was something. The great thing about that is that moment is truly shared with all the writers, the producers, the directors, the whole cast, the crew, and it's just a really good moment. And the crew that couldn't be there, I actually took my Emmy back to North Carolina, and I And then we passed it around the crew, and then we all took photos of us, sort of, making silly faces with our, with the Emmy, which was great because the guys don't get to actually get their hands on it otherwise. And but in the room right there on that night, all being on stage together, and you put your arms around each other, there's a real, there's a real camaraderie. There's a closeness, and it's, I feel sorry for Mad Men, but 3 times ain't bad,
Well, for this season, obviously you and Claire are back at the Emmys, but what kind of thrill was it to have Marina also Emmy nominated, and Mandy Patinkin and Rupert Friend?
Well, as soon as I got the news, I just sent an email to all those guys going, and I just wrote unbelievable, and just said it was extraordinary that there was this 5 of us were nominated from the cast, and I think they were, over the moon. They were over the moon. There was some talk last year that Mandy had really done such exquisite work with Saul Berenson that some people felt maybe he should have been nominated last year, and so we were just all fingers crossed that he would be recognized this year, and he was. And then Rupert and Morena were a bonus. That's just a bonus. They're no less deserving. It was just people weren't expecting it as much. So when all of us got nominated, it was just it's fantastic. And then we all emailed each other, and it's a really good feeling. It's a really, really good feeling, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there.
I guess looking at season 2 of Homeland, because at the sort of season 1 there was the big question as to who Brody was, and just how do you feel like we saw Nicholas Brody develop in season 2, and perhaps more than anything, the audience's relationship with Brody over season 2?
Brody represented the threat in season 1. He was a conflicted, confused anti-hero. He was a good man, poisoned by an experience of war, and returns to do something deadly on U.S. soil. You might argue there are better ways he could have dealt with it, but he's a guy who's had been brutalized by his experience, physically and mentally. I think the important distinction with Brody for me always that he was never radicalized. He wasn't committing an act of jihad. It was always a more personal act of revenge for Brody. And he's just a very confused puppy, let's face it. So I think season 2 started with no one knowing his secret. And I think the expectation was that Brody would keep this secret with him for a good deal of season 2. And one of the great and exciting moments of season 2 was the end of episode 2, when Saul just found the video that he made, and handed it to Carrie. And it was just like, at that point, there was a moment of, I was intrigued by that moment. I think momentarily disappointed. I thought, oh, well, now Brody's character is more overt, it's more explicit. There's less opportunity perhaps to play this ambiguity. Who is he? Will he, won't he? He's been outed, as it were. But the season really then saw Brody become a pawn in everybody's game. He was like tumbleweed, blown from one group to the next, being used by CIA, who I think successfully turned him and used him against Abu Nazir. And I think, his love for Carrie motivates him a lot. And then he was asked to perform increasingly extraordinary acts. For some people, I know it's been well documented, the end of season 2 started to stretch credibility for some people, but the story was never less than compelling, in my view. It was a white knuckle ride, and then of course you had that terrific finale when just when you thought, right, how are Brody and Carrie going to run off into the sunset together? It seems like everything is coming good for this couple. This bomb goes off at the CIA, and of course, all the fingers point at Brody, so he has to go away. It was an interestingly different season to play because it was far clearer, actually, who Brody was, and he was even more the victim in the second season. He was a pawn. He was being used by everybody.
Yeah, season 2 ended with your character on the run, and I think in the critics' meetings that in your presentation that you had a couple, I guess last week, it was indicated that you would not be in the first 2 episodes of season 3. Tell us about season 3 as much as you can, without hurting anybody's feelings.
Without any spoilers, okay. So what happens at the end of season 3 is this. Well, you know what Homeland does so brilliantly is it recalibrates itself. It's able to reset itself for the beginning of each year, and I think it's their intention that they choose a political theater somewhere in the world, and then they can enact their story in that environment. And it's clear from the first 2 episodes, I think, that the Middle East will have an increasingly important part to play in season 3. Everyone knows now that Brody is not there early on, but as Alex Gans has said at the TCAs, it's a function of story. He's on the run, and I think they just decided not to go and see him on the run, initially, and just be with the fallout of this bomb at the CIA, because there were a lot of questions that needed answering, and so the CIA is in the dock. The CIA is being hung out to dry, and they've got to defend themselves. When we do come to Brody, I think it will be interesting. I think people will be, riveted by it. I hope. Brody will continue his descent into the 9 circles of hell. This is a man, I think, who is going to spiral a lot further down before he's able to make any kind of recovery. His journey within this season is particularly secretive, and it is entirely removed from the CIA's lead that they have in the Middle East. And really, this is all about a lead in the Middle East, pursued by Saul and Carrie and Peter Quinn. And also this season you'll see a lot more, you'll see Saul's entire philosophy questioned, man who's been standing on the sidelines for a long time, able to be the iconoclast, throw criticisms in from the side, and he's now running the agency. It's a bit like being in opposition in politics and then being in office. Once you're in office, it's a world of compromise, and that's going to be an interesting examination of Saul's character. His relationship with Carrie continues. Peter Quinn's relationship starts to come to the fore. It's an interesting relationship between him and Carrie. They're in some ways quite similar characters. They're extreme characters prepared to do extreme things to meet their ends, meet their goals. So, it'll be that usual fantastic mix of character study, interpersonal relationships set against, the international politics of an intelligence agency trying to do the do in a different country.
We've got a question in our chat room, Damian, from CTU Buchanan, and he asks, do you think Brody still believes or has ever believed in Abu Nazir's cause, or was he motivated solely by ISIS's death?
I think Brody believed he was never going to go home, and I think he took on Allah and the Islamic faith as a real salvation to him. I think he took all the good things all the benevolent and beautiful things out of that religion and used it as to sustain him. I don't think he saw it as a religion of violence at all. Abu Nazir clearly does, and Abu Nazir, I think, carefully, cleverly, and as the arch manipulator, without Brody perhaps realizing it, was just gently manipulating and working Brody over. I think the vice president dropping a drone on the madrasa where Aisa is being educated was just like a gift that fell into Abu Nazir's lap. That was just, that just lit the touch paper for Brody, and Abu Nazir at that point, I think, just had to sit back and just say, well, Nicholas, whatever you feel is important for you to do, of course we'll support you. And Nicholas Brody at this point is an unstable, unhinged, unreliable agent. However peaceful he finds that, and however much succor he gets from this religion, this new faith, and he's not stable enough. So he goes back to act, and he does it with Abu Nazir's support. You can't do it without Abu Nazir's support. So at that point, they're immediately colluding. It's a tricky one.
Well, Damian, good luck at the Emmys here in a few weeks. Quite a few of us are predicting that you're going to pick up that second Emmy this time around. So it won't be nearly a surprise, as much of a surprise if it happens this time.
Oh, it will. It will. It would be amazing. It would be amazing. But it's just going to be fun being there.
Well, enjoy your time with all your castmates and producers and writers and so forth. And I'll be thinking about Henry's family, too. He's nominated in that writing category. And just good luck with the Emmys, and thank you. I hope you have a great summer.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.